Welcome to Lit and Unfiltered by My Element, the podcast where real talk meets cannabis culture. Whether you're lighting up for wellness, relaxation, or curiosity, this is the space for raw, unfiltered conversations that go beyond the buzz. In every episode, we'll spark discussions that keep it real, give you the facts and push boundaries. No fluff, no filler. Just real talk about the cannabis revolution happening right now. So roll with us, kick back, and let's dive into another lit conversation. Proudly brought to you by My Element Electric Lighters. Make your own flame. Now to your hosts, Jax and Mia.
Okay, so imagine a world, right, where cannabis isn't just like legal, but it's actually an economic powerhouse and a force for social change. That's what we're diving into today, the global cannabis movement.
It's pretty amazing how fast things are changing, isn't it? Countries everywhere are like totally rethinking their whole deal with cannabis.
Totally. Just to give you an idea of the scale of this thing, by 2028, the U.S. alone is projected to have almost 1.75 million jobs just in the cannabis industry.
Wow.
1.75 million.
Right.
That's more people than live in Philadelphia.
It's not even just the numbers, it's the kinds of jobs, right? Like high-tech growing facilities, cannabis-infused, culinary experiences.
Oh, like the cannabis cafes and stuff?
Exactly. Even cannabis-based wellness products. It's a whole new world for entrepreneurs.
It's huge business. I mean, take Colorado, for example, right?
Yeah.
After they legalized recreational cannabis, they raked in over $2 billion just in tax revenue.
Wow.
Between 2014 and 2021.
That's incredible.
$2 billion. That's a game changer when it comes to funding public services.
Yeah.
Did they, earmark that money for anything specific?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it gets at something really important about doing legalization right. So Colorado, they were smart. They put a bunch of that money towards building schools, substance abuse programs, even mental health services.
That's amazing.
It shows how this whole new industry can actually, directly benefit communities.
Using cannabis revenue to actually address social issues,
Huh?
love it.
Yeah.
But, let's be real. Legalization has a whole other side to it, one that hits close to home for a lot of people, the whole social justice aspect.
Right.
For decades, cannabis laws were used to unfairly target communities of color. So how is legalization trying to right those wrongs?
Yeah, no, you're hitting on a really, really important point. And you see states like Illinois actually taking steps to deal with that messed up history. So they're clearing past cannabis convictions, which basically gives a clean slate to people who were unfairly penalized under those old, outdated laws.
That's incredible. It's a huge step towards, actually repairing the damage done by those discriminatory policies.
Absolutely.
But it can't stop there, right?
No, for sure not.
We have to make sure the legal market itself doesn't just become another system that disadvantages those same communities.
Exactly. It has to be equitable from the ground up. So that means we need to see fair licensing practices, social equity programs that actually give resources and opportunities to the people who were harmed by the war on drugs, and of course, access to capital for minority-owned businesses.
So can you break down what those social equity programs might actually look like? What are some concrete things that can make a real difference?
Yeah, absolutely. So imagine initiatives that give business loans or grants specifically to people from communities that were hit hardest by those old cannabis laws, or
Right.
mentorship programs that connect people who want to start cannabis businesses with people who are already veterans in the industry. It's about actually empowering the people who were shut out before.
It makes you wonder why we didn't do this sooner.
Right.
So we're seeing this global shift towards legalization. But how each country is actually tackling it is, it's all over the map, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So let's dive into some examples.
Okay, let's do it.
And first stop, Canada. Back in 2018, they went all in with nationwide legalization.
Big move.
Huge. But even with that bold move, it hasn't been all smooth sailing, right?
Right. They've hit a few bumps in the road for sure. One of the biggest ones is, and this is surprising to some people, the black market in Canada is still alive and well.
Really?
It's crazy, right? But see, the legal market, while, well-intentioned, it's got high taxes and strict regulations. So for a lot of people, it's still easier and cheaper to just go to their old dealer.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right. And that's a big challenge for a lot of places that legalize.
It is. So how do you encourage people to choose the legal option, especially if it's going to, cost them a bit more?
That's the million-dollar question, right? It's tricky. Governments can look at things like adjusting the taxes, making legal cannabis more affordable. But they also need to educate people, really drive home the potential risks of going with the black market. Like, you don't really know what you're getting.
It's true.
And when you buy from the black market, you could be supporting criminal activity, things like that.
Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. So Canada's got their way, but speaking of different approaches, next stop, Uruguay.
The pioneers.
They were the OGs, right? They legalized cannabis way back in 2013, and their whole approach was really unique.
It really was. They were all about public health and safety. So they went with this government-regulated system that controls everything, like production, distribution, even how much people can consume.
Wow.
Yeah, you can actually walk into a pharmacy in Uruguay and buy cannabis.
That's wild. That's so different than what we've seen in other places. It'll be interesting to see how those different priorities play out in the long run. But before we get too far into the global scene, let's take a little detour to a country with a, shall we say, interesting relationship with cannabis, the Netherlands.
Yes. Famous for their canals and their coffee shops.
Exactly. Amsterdam's coffee shops are legendary, right? But here's the kicker. Even in a country known for being, shall we say, relaxed about cannabis, those coffee shops, they're kind of in a legal gray area.
It's true.
Which just goes to show how complicated this whole thing is on a global scale.
Yeah, the Netherlands is a really interesting case study. I mean, it's totally decriminalized to use and have small amounts of cannabis personally.
Right.
But growing it and supplying it wholesale, that's mostly still illegal.
So where are those coffee shops getting their supply?
Exactly. It's this weird situation where they can sell it to you, no problem. But where it comes from is this whole other story.
So even in a place like Amsterdam, it's more complicated than it seems on the surface.
Way more complicated.
It feels like navigating the world of legal cannabis is anything but simple.
That's for sure.
Every country's making up its own rules as it goes, and sometimes those rules seem to create more problems than they solve.
True, but it's also kind of exciting. It's like this constantly changing landscape. And honestly, that's what makes it so fascinating to watch. Every country's approach, whether it works or not, teaches us something new that can help other countries figure out their own cannabis policies.
It's like a giant global experiment, with each country adding to our understanding of how cannabis can impact, well, everything. Society, the economy, the whole world, really.
Exactly. And as this whole thing unfolds, I think we're going to see even more creative and innovative approaches to legalization, regulation, social equity. It's a really exciting time to be paying attention to all this.
So we've been talking about how different countries are approaching cannabis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Canada going all in, Uruguay with their public health focus. It's like everyone's trying something different, and we get to see what works. But what about the future? Where's this whole green wave headed next?
Well, all eyes are on Mexico right now.
Mexico.
Yeah, they're about to become the third country in the world to completely legalize cannabis.
Wow, that's huge.
It's a big deal for the Americas, for the whole world, really.
Mexico legalizing just feels massive. I mean, it's got such a, long and complicated history with the plant, especially with the cartels and the war on drugs and everything.
For sure.
What's making them decide to just go for it and fully legalize?
Well, they see it as a way to, hit back at the cartels, right? Take away a big chunk of their income.
Makes sense.
But it's also about the economic upside. Creating jobs, bringing in tax revenue, all that.
Right.
And of course, there's the whole social justice aspect too, trying to fix some of the damage done by the war on drugs, particularly in communities that were really hit hard.
So Mexico legalizes, the cartels potentially lose power, and they could actually see some real economic benefits. Could that, have a domino effect? Could it influence other countries in the region?
Absolutely. I mean, it could be a total game changer for Latin America. If Mexico's experiment is a success, you might see other countries in the region saying, hey, maybe we should rethink this whole cannabis thing too.
It's like a whole continent going green.
Right. And it's not even just about individual countries changing their minds anymore. The whole global conversation around cannabis is different now.
Yeah.
Even international organizations are starting to come around.
It's crazy to think about, the UN, this massive global entity, rethinking its stance on cannabis. What's making that happen? What's shifting on such a big scale?
Well, I think it's a few things, right? There's more and more scientific research coming out all the time showing the potential medical benefits of cannabis.
Wow.
And that's challenging a lot of those old, outdated ideas.
Yeah.
Plus, you've got the economic factor. As more countries legalize, The legal cannabis industry is just getting bigger and bigger.
Right.
And governments, they see that. They see the potential revenue, and it becomes harder and harder to ignore.
Yeah, it's like follow the money, right?
Exactly. And then, you can't forget about just the changing social attitudes towards cannabis.
That's true.
More and more people around the world are just like more open to the idea of legal cannabis.
Right.
And that puts pressure on governments, on international organizations to at least have a conversation.
So it's like this perfect storm. You've got science, you've got economics, you've got changing social attitudes, all kind of pushing cannabis into this new light.
It's pretty amazing to watch, honestly.
It is. But I gotta say, even with all this momentum behind legalization, I still have some concerns. Like, one thing that worries me is, what about the little guy? What about all the people who were harmed by prohibition? What's to stop big corporations from just swooping in and taking over?
That's a really important point. And it's definitely a risk, right? We've seen it happen before in other industries.
Yeah.
As the cannabis market grows and matures, there's always a chance that these giant corporations, with all their money and resources, will just muscle their way in.
Right.
And the smaller businesses, the independent growers and retailers, especially the ones owned by minorities or people who are directly impacted by the war on drugs, they could get squeezed out.
And that just feels wrong.
Totally. It would be like we're trying to fix these past injustices, but then we just end up creating new ones.
Exactly. So how do we stop that from happening? How do we make sure that legalization actually benefits everyone?
It comes down to smart policy and regulation, really being intentional about it. Lawmakers need to create a system that levels the playing field, one that actually supports small businesses and social equity applicants.
Okay, so what would that look like in practice?
Well, you could have things like limits on how many licenses any one company can hold.
Oh, so no cannabis monopolies.
Exactly. Or tax breaks or other incentives specifically for small businesses and minority-owned businesses to give them a leg up.
I like it.
And then, putting money towards social equity programs. Because if we're serious about righting those past wrongs, it's going to take resources, it's going to take commitment.
It sounds like creating a truly fair and equitable cannabis industry takes a lot more than just saying, okay, it's legal now.
Oh, absolutely. Legalization is just the first step.
Right.
After that, it's all about what you do with it. It's about putting the right rules in place, making sure there's competition, preventing monopolies, and making sure that everyone, especially those who are most marginalized, actually get to share in the benefits of this new industry.
So it's complicated.
It is.
But there's definitely potential.
Tons of potential. I mean, think about it. We're talking about a plant that was demonized for decades.
Right.
And now it's changing laws, it's creating jobs, it's prompting these huge conversations about social justice and equity.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it like that.
It really is. We're seeing a fundamental shift in how we think about cannabis, not just in individual countries, but globally. And it's only just beginning.
Man, we've covered some serious ground today, huh?
We really have.
From the economic boom around legal cannabis to the social justice side of it all to how different countries are like writing the rule book as they go. It's clear this little plant is shaking things up on a global scale.
It's definitely making us rethink a lot of things we thought we knew about, well, everything, really.
Yeah.
Healthcare, the justice system, how we grow our economies. It's wild.
It really is. It feels like we're at this point now where there's no going back.
Yeah.
Like more and more countries are seeing legalization in action, seeing the impact it can have. Do you think this is it? Is this the turning point?
It's definitely heading in that direction, that's for sure. The momentum behind legalization, both medical and recreational, is undeniable. And as more countries get on board, they see the potential. It's like, how can you argue with that?
But, I mean, it's not all going to be easy, right?
Yeah.
Like we've talked about, there are still those big challenges. Keeping the black market in check, making sure big corporations don't just take over, making sure everyone benefits, especially those who got hit hardest by prohibition. How do we actually deal with all that and make sure cannabis is a force for good in the world?
Yeah, it's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There's no easy answer. But I think it starts with being smart about it. Governments and regulators, they have to make consumer safety a priority. They have to support small businesses, create opportunities for those who need them most. And we can't just leave it up to them. As consumers, we have a voice too. We can choose to support businesses that are doing things the right way, that are giving back to the community, that are really trying to make a difference.
So it's all connected, right? It's about individual choices adding up to create change on a bigger scale.
Exactly. It's about all of us being part of this conversation, speaking up about what we believe in, and advocating for a future where cannabis is a force for positive change for everyone.
Well said. This whole deep dive has been a real eye-opener, I gotta say. It's not just about whether you're pro-cannabis or against it anymore. It's way bigger than that.
Totally.
It's about how we, as a global community, shape the future of this plant, this industry, and harness its power to make the world a better place. So there you have it, folks. That wraps up our deep dive into the global cannabis landscape.
It's been a pleasure exploring all of this with you.
The pleasure was all mine. And to all our listeners out there, thanks for coming along for the ride. If you're as fascinated by this stuff as we are, don't forget to follow us on social media @MyAilment for more insights and updates. Until next time, stay curious.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Lit and Unfiltered by My Element. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation and picked up some fresh insights on cannabis culture. Also, don't forget to check out myelement.store for our full range of electric lighters and accessories, designed with style, sustainability, and free lifetime replacement in mind. Still here? Cool. Here's an exclusive heads up just for our listeners. We've got a flash sale coming soon with over 50% off select lighters as well as some wild giveaways. You won't want to miss it. Head over to myelement.store. Join the crew and keep an eye on your inbox for the details. Until next time, keep it lit. My Element. Make your own flame.